وتعالى.
Oppression, as Islam instructs us to stand against. I don't want to harm one at the expense of the other, right? So now one brother is about to come and hurt your other brother, seriously hurt them. How do you preserve your first brother's dignity by not exposing them, but at the same time prevent and protect your other brother? So this is where you have to outweigh the pros and cons.
Yeah.
What I would do is what's called the middle solution. The middle solution, ulama say, look, can you go to your brother and advise him not to get into the business with your other brother without mentioning any details? If that deters or that makes your brother not enter into business with him, and he says, okay, I'll take your advice. All I have to say to him is, brother, look, I know you and I know the other brother. I don't think you guys are a good fit. Just take my advice. Don't do business. But if he insists and says, no, we're about to start tomorrow, you need to tell me, is there something serious about me getting with him? Because everything appears good to me and I'm very, excited to get into this business. Sure. Then at that point, if you stay quiet, this person will lose their money, will be cheated. And you can't say, well, who cares? Because again, he's your brother. So what you'll do is you say, look, I've dealt with him in the past and we didn't have a good experience. Is that enough? He may insist and say, no, that's not enough. Maybe it was your fault. You're the problem. Well, do you want me to tell you that he took some of my money? He did me wrong. At that point, I'm trying my best to preserve this brother's dignity by giving you the least amount of information to stay away from this and protect you. Because in the end, I'm trying to protect you, but also protecting the other brother's dignity. And likewise in marriages, right? When somebody comes and says, is this a man good for my daughter? And you know this man is not good for their daughter. You don't have to start by saying, oh, okay, let me open the record. This is what he did in 2002. This is what. No. Islam says try to preserve their dignity, but advise that person to not proceed with this. Like, your daughter deserves someone better. Look for someone else. This may not be a good fit. And keep it at that level. As much as you can. Preserve the dignity, but also preserve the other person from the severe harm that can come out of it.
Sure, it sounds like a very logical way to go through something like that, to try to stay in that middle ground. Related, because you brought up the idea of the marriage proposal and things like that, there's a question related to that. Is it permissible to share information about the family if it's necessary? Or is it only about the spouse that's in question?
Very good. So this is going to be different culture by culture. In some cultures, when the husband comes to ask about a wife, or vice versa, when the wife is asking about the husband, the family is a considerable factor in some cultures, meaning that this husband, if he knows that her sister was like this or her mother is like that, he would not marry from that family. And vice versa, if they know that his brother or his sister or his mother, in the end, because we have a hadith by the Prophet that says, تَخَيَّرُوا لِنُطَفِكُمْ, choose for where you would plant your seeds, right? فَإِنَّ الْعِرْقَ دَسَّاسٌ. He talks about genes, and that good genes will play a big role and bad genes will also play a big role. So it's based on that, someone might say, how is this family? Ali alayhi salam, before he got married to Lady al-Baneen, he went to his brother Aqil, who was very qualified to speak on people's lineages and ansab. And he says to him, I want a woman who was born by the courageous men of the Arab. because I want a courageous man from her. Although I am courageous as Ali ibn Abi Talib, but sometimes the child can take genes from the mother, and if she is not from a courageous family, then Ali ibn Abi Talib does not want that son. How is he going to serve Islam and serve the mission of Imam Hussein in Karbala while he does not possess these qualities? So anyhow, so if the person is looking for the family as well as the spouse, and that matters to them in the decision, then yes. But again, let's talk about practice, not theory. Theoretically, there is a chance, but again, they have to be very cautious, and they would have to go with the most minimum, at the minimum extent of mentioning these faults. They can't go, for example, and say, oh, I'll talk about his uncle and his aunt, his third cousin, and take advantage of the fact. No, they need to limit it to what is important to the husband or wife, what is important to the marriage and its success, and keep it to the limit, the most minimum, bare minimum extent. Always remember the flesh of the dead believer. Practical advice for all the brothers and sisters out there is that in today's world, even if you ask about someone or their family, a lot of times you're not going to get the answer that is really that you can depend on. A lot of times the answers are driven by emotions, driven by love and hate. So what's the solution? Solution, my dears, if we really want a practical solution, is that have the prospect husband and wife, or the guy and the girl, have a 6-month contract, marriage contract, without, of course, any physical interaction, to preserve both. And at that point, their conversations together will unveil a lot of things that could be about the person or the family. It is a lot more practical than just asking a person and that person doesn't live with them. I'll tell you what he knows from the outside, but no matter what, if he loves them, he's going to say good things. If he doesn't, he's going to do them wrong. So in the end, the best approach is to deal with that person, get to know them before you make the decision.
Would it be potentially a good idea to go to their enemies and then the people that love them and take the middle?
Wouldn't, because that would make you confused. Because when I go to the enemy, they're going to mention things. A lot of times they're going to exaggerate, say things that are not even true, or take a little thing in the history and add to it, and say, put spices and things on it, and say, oh, that and this. And you go to the one that loves them, they're going to say only the good things, you can shy away from the bad things, and then you're going to be very confused here. So definitely the practical approach is to know for yourself.
Sure. And still in the topic of backbiting, on the idea of religious leaders or religious scholars, how do we apply this rule when dealing with
Ahsant, and this is very, very important. One of the exceptions I've mentioned in the lecture is the backbiting against the deviant scholars, right? Now, deviance here can be taken loosely. And again, I want to remind myself, twice, thrice, 100 times, and remind my younger brothers and sisters and all my elders in the community that we really have to keep Allah between our eyes and in our hearts before we use these exceptions. We can't take them loosely. People's dignity is very respected. وَلَقَدْ كَرَّمْنَا بَنِي آدَمَ. We have honored Bani Adam. Mu'mineen, حُرْمَةِ الْمُؤْمِن. The dignity of a mu'min is greater than the dignity of the Kaaba. More important than the sanctity of the Kaaba. That's what the Prophet taught us in Ahlul Bayt. So keep that in mind. And when we say mu'min, we don't necessarily mean the most righteous. Any mu'min, any lover and follower of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, even if they are not practicing the best, they're still a mu'min and they have dignity that is to be respected. So when we come to this alim, we have to first consider, is what they're saying something that is not, there's no room for ijtihad in? Because some ideas that we present and talk about, there's a room for discussion. For example, when we talk about fiqhi matters and when we talk about the crescent at the beginning of the month, there are multiple views. We can't say this scholar is a deviant because he has a different view. These things are subject to ijtihad, right? But there are principles that are not subject to ijtihad. If someone comes and starts instilling or infusing doubts in the community about the Holy Quran being the book of Allah, or someone who comes and starts infusing doubts in the hearts of the community about Imam al-Hujjah being present in our time, these are fundamental principles that we do not tolerate throwing misconceptions about and misleading people in terms of those things. We think of that like the hijacker, right? The example of the hijacker. When you know there's a hijacker who's about to hijack a plane or hijack people, You cannot say, well, I have to preserve their dignity and not talk about them, even if they're a believer. You still have to warn people from them. Likewise, when somebody's trying to hijack your faith, someone trying to put suspicions in your heart about your religion, we cannot tolerate that. Now, whose duty is the duty to identify and expose? Not the entire community can't do that. It's going to be the experts. So I can't, because I heard a lecture as a, a person who is not, let's say, versed in aqa'id and in religious matters, and I heard a lecture, and one thing the speaker presented didn't sound too good to me. That doesn't give me the right to go and say, oh, he's a deviant, and I'm going to go and expose them to the community. No. This is something that requires referring to the experts. That's why the seminaries in the history of Shia Islam have dealt with this numerous times. But what do? First, they would contact each other as great ulama and mujtahideen. They would consult each other. They would send some people to advise that scholar first. Maybe he'll change his mind. Maybe he has misconceptions. But when they reach a point that this scholar is insisting on throwing doubts right and left, then that's where they either issue a statement, and sometimes some of them don't even issue a statement. They use other methods because the issue can be very sensitive. If it's going to cause bigger division and more problems, then they have to use alternative routes, right? By educating people on a narrow level, by sending out ulama to speak and to dispel and refute the misconception that this person was saying. So these things, again, they have to be dealt with case-by-case scenario. But if it comes down to a scholar being a deviant, not just a deviant, if I know the scholar is a danger to the safety and spiritual well-being of my community, and I know that for sure, then of course it's my duty to warn the people from that person, because the purpose of the scholar is to make the beliefs of people stronger and to help them in their spiritual journey in this life. But if he's defeating the purpose, we're seeing the opposite effect, then we definitely have to take a stand here and follow the procedure. We first give him advice. We try to tell him to change. Otherwise, we would have to take it to the next level and make sure people are aware of this.
Inshallah. Related to that, someone asked specifically, if I know someone with, in this case, 100% certainty is a predator, what is the obligation to share that information? We talked a little bit about the sheikhs or sayyids, speakers being deviants. Does it follow the same?
It follows the same, but with more sensitivity.
Sure.
The dignity, again, the dignity of a believer is very sacred. A believer is not a perfect person, right? Let's say at a given time they had committed a sin here and there. They've done something wrong in their life, right? That doesn't give me the permission to go and destroy their reputation and expose them. We have to follow a procedure. Now, a person who's a predator is indeed a risk to the safety of children and families, right? And it's not something that we can tolerate. But at the same time, Islam does not say, okay, right away go take him and expose him and end his reputation. That's not what Islam says. Islam says take the steps necessary to protect people from him while trying your best to preserve his dignity, because he may repent and change. Maybe he's going through some issues, and these issues will be fixed anytime soon. Maybe if he's exposed, it will destroy an entire family, not just him. Maybe he has a wife and children, relatives, and so on and so forth, that will all be in a very bad situation if that happens. So before we jump to the exposing, we leave that as a last resort. In other words, if we have exhausted all means of protecting people, and there is one left, and that is there's no way we can protect children and people from that person but to expose, then that becomes the example of eating the flesh again. Then this person is either going to die in the desert, or he's going to eat a little bit of that flesh to remain alive. But again, how much ego is usually in this, and how much emotions are usually factored into this? Sometimes the person might say, well, because I have children, I'm worried about them, I'm going to jump and expose this person, I'm not going to follow your steps. Islam says you cannot abuse these exceptions. Again, taqwa is required when these exceptions are being used. Just because I don't like this person, just because I had a bad experience with him, does not give me the right to manipulate these laws that we have mentioned and to use them to my interest. One of the hard things about fiqh, and I can be very frank with you, that ulama, when they explain the practical rulings, they have a hard time putting them in a way that ensures that people do not misuse them. And that's very challenging on my part, right? When I present a ruling, I want to be very mindful of the situation, and I want to remind myself and others to please help me and help yourself into applying this rule carefully, right? It's like giving somebody a very, very dangerous medicine, something that is only given to situations that are very severe, and trying to administer it with caution, right? You don't want to say, here, just take it whenever you feel bad, when you feel ill, just take the pill. No, you say, hold on, call me first, let me see what your symptoms are, maybe you can take a little bit of it. Situations that have to do with people's dignities and reputations are as serious, if not more than this.
Yeah, thank you, Sayyid, and I think you know, inshallah, we can take that and keep that in mind as you're giving these answers. I think, again, you always do a good job of giving that full picture and giving the idea of exceptions and providing us with those tools, alhamdulillah. Related to the idea of exceptions, one person asks, does the rule of ghibat also apply to non-Muslims or non-believers? For example, if that non-Muslim is a thief, a liar, etc., can we share that information more freely?
Yes, the same rulings apply. Now, when the ulama talk about the definition of ghiba, generally speaking, they say ghibatul mu'min, the ghiba of a believer. Now, ghibat of non-mu'min is not something we should be engaged in. It's not advised. But we don't have enough proof to say that it's absolutely haram, because again, that's means we need enough proof to say that something is haram. We always, when we come to the religious texts, we limit it to the information that we have. Anything beyond that, we can't follow assumptions and guesses. And according to the prominent ulama, the definition they have found revolves around mu'min. But again, they also advise that just because a non-mu'min is not included in the definition, it does not give us the right to go and speak ill about anyone who we wish. We still need to be very cautious and train our tongues to only say that which is good.
Thank you, Sayyid. And I guess a question related to the aftermath of performing ghibat or gossiping. When you do backbite, do you need to go to that person that you perform that on? Do you need to ask them for forgiveness?
So there's most of the ulama, including the Sayyid Sistani, they say that it's not necessary. What's necessary is real regret. If I really regret within myself and I plan that I would not do this again and I do istighfar, that's sufficient. But it's mustahab, it's better if, and pay attention to the if here, if me telling him will not cause further damage. Because a lot of people are sensitive. If I go to him and I said, look brother, you know, 2 years ago we sat in a gathering and I tore you up in the gathering. Well, some of them are not going to take it easy, right? They're going to start having grudges against you. They may start not trusting that you lose that trust. That they'll start to have the insecurity wherever they go. Maybe he talked about me in front of these people. Maybe these people are talking about me now. And then you have all these issues because you went and you told him about it. But if you trust the person's mentality and mindset, and you know, you trust them very well, and you say, look, you know, at a given point, this is what I've done. Now there's an alternative route that we can give to each other. See, usually what we do is, before we travel, I don't know how it is in the Khoja community, but in the Iraqi community, I know this, before we travel, the person would call their friends or, you know, close ones that they deal with, and they say, give me bara'atu dhimma, just forgive me. In case I said something about you, in case I did you wrong somehow. And they give you that general forgiveness that's inclusive of a lot of things in the package without knowing the details, right? So that's a way to do it. And it's like, especially on the night of Qadr that's coming up, it's good to say, look, brothers and sisters, you know, I've saw these, and sometimes we criticize WhatsApp messages, but sometimes we need to be also mindful that some of these messages are positive. I've seen this message rotate on the night of Qadr, and at least in the Arabic platforms, and they would say, you know, in case I've said something about you, please forgive me, this is the night of Qadr. And I think that's a beautiful way to do it. These are the messages that should be going around to the community members, right? So on the night of Qadr, I say, okay, and I honestly have done this myself, not to brag about it, but it's something that I've learned and I like to share it with others. On the nights of Qadr, part of the hajat I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for, and when we do du'as, I say, oh Allah, please forgive all of those who have wronged me in my life and who have backbitten against me, and please reward them, give them half of their reward you're giving me for this night, and forgive me for anyone who I have done wrong or who I have backbitten against in the past. And I just feel comfortable after that, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is very just. He's going to say, okay, just because you dropped all the sins of others against you, I will guide the hearts of those that you have done wrong to drop their sins or your sins against them. So it works both ways.
Does that also apply to, for example, if I was speaking about someone and I was gossiping about them to specific people, can I go to those people I talked to and say, I said those things and I should not have said them? So it's not asking for forgiveness from the person that you wronged, but instead trying to fix
rectifying,
where you spread it.
Yes, I think that is important. So rectifying sometimes is obligatory, sometimes it's not. It's obligatory if what I said has caused serious damage to that person. For example, what I said about him made the entire community cut him off. And now I have to fix what I've said. So I go back to the community and say, look, this is what happened, this person is a good person, we had this conflict, it's resolved, so please forgive him, don't take it too far. Sometimes, now this is when we're talking ghibah, but if we're talking slander, it's obligatory to go to these people and tell them. Slander is when I'm lying about the person, I'm making a fake lie. That's worse than ghibah. Now ghibah is saying something that's true about them, but it was hidden. No, slander is when I go and I tell people, look, he robbed me, but in essence he didn't. This is where I have to go to everyone who I said he robbed me and say, guys, I lied, he didn't rob me. Or else this person is going to be blamed because of me, right? I have to make sure he's innocent in front of everyone who I have made him look bad by slandering him.
Related to this, and perhaps you had covered this in your lecture, but is it true that when ghibat is performed, that the good deeds from the person who performs it goes to the person that they
we have a hadith
wrong.
like that. We have a hadith like that. And ulama have different viewpoints in terms of the authenticity. For example, late Ayatollah al-Khoi could not verify these ahadith in terms of authenticity, right? So we have to be clear on this. But again, there's a high chance that this hadith, just because it's not authentic, it doesn't mean that in reality it's not really a hadith said by the Ahlul Bayt, because the authenticity means that the narrators of the hadith, one of them we don't know too well, or we have not confirmed. But just because we have not confirmed him, it doesn't mean that this hadith could not have been said by the Imams. So that's why we say to our brothers and sisters that if this hadith is indeed said by the Imams, it's very dangerous, because every time I say something bad about someone, backbiting against them, the deeds that will come out of my record and will enter their record. So that is definitely a big loss. And I think if this was done monetarily, we would not do a lot of ghibat, right? If they have your bank account, someone, and they're monitoring what you're saying, and every time you mention someone, automatically it's direct deposit to their account, I think we would be in a different situation.
Yes, definitely. I think it might be easier to implement these.
Yes, always these tangible examples. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala taught us in the Holy Quran, يَضْرِبُ اللَّهُ الْأَمْثَالِ لِلنَّاسِ لَعَلَّهُمْ يَعْقِلُونَ. Allah gives these examples and analogies so that people can comprehend, because we are materialistic. We are confined by the sensual world and by physics, physical world, right? We're not always understanding of the metaphysical world. So we need examples. So Allah is always in the Quran using analogies about this. Do you like to eat the flesh of your dead believer? Why is He using these analogies? Because it makes us understanding, comprehend the seriousness of the issue. That's why we use the analogy of taking money from your bank. Because sometimes we may underestimate deeds. Like we've never seen deeds like the hasanat, the actual currency of deeds, right? There's something we'll see in the hereafter. So we don't really take them too serious. It's like a child who's 3 years old, and you tell them, look, I'm gonna give you money, right? They don't know the real value of money. Whether you give them $1 or 20, my son calls it monies. Whether you give him $1 or 10, he doesn't know. He knows it's monies, and that's all it's pleasing to him. So at that point, when they grow up, they start to understand what money is and what the value is. Likewise, we still have not really, I don't want to say us, all of us, but some of us may have not yet comprehended the real value of good deeds and hasanat, but we understand the value of money. So therefore, giving the example of money makes us relate well to the deeds and how we don't want to lose these deeds.
Yeah. I just want to check on the time. 5 minutes, okay. there were a couple of questions that came in, so I just wanted to make sure we had time to get through these. This is kind of stepping back a little bit, but someone asked specifically about the idea of an oppressor. And if I remember correctly, you covered part of this topic in your lecture. If someone wants to speak out against their oppressor to prevent them from oppressing others.
Okay, very good. Now this again is of multiple branches or multiple situations. Situation one is irrespective of whether this person will oppress others or not. Do I have the right to speak against my oppressor? Now if your oppressor continues to oppress you and he has not resolved the issue, then they continue to be your oppressor. If they oppressed me like 10 years ago and they already asked for forgiveness, then it's done deal. But no, we're talking about a continuously oppressing oppressor, the one who is always, they have not given me back my rights, so they're still an oppressor in that case. Sayyid Sistani says, based on obligatory precaution, which means you can resort to the next most learned faqih in this matter, you shouldn't speak about them unless you know that the person you speak to will help you remove that oppression. Be it the judge, be it the authorities, be it some good mu'min that can help you get back your rights. Other ulama say no. Quran clearly states that you can talk about them without having to consider these factors, right? But it's more cautious to only do it in the need to regain back your possessions. Now that's one. Number two of the second part of this answer to this question is that if it's not about me, but I seriously, between me and Allah, know that this person is not going to only oppress me. They're going to oppress a lot of people in the community. And it's out of me protecting them, I want to advise them. And again, we go back to the first thing we've mentioned. Try to preserve the dignity, but be mindful of preserving other people as well.
Thank you, Sayyid. I know a lot of these kind of, they're all interconnected.
Yes,
with the
they
same
complete
sort of,
each other, hopefully, and they make a bigger picture, inshallah.
Inshallah. And again, as these questions are coming in, I apologize if I'm going back to something we've already covered. Someone asked that if, when dealing with being hurt by someone else, they talk to their friend about it as a form of like to be therapeutic.
Venting, to vent.
Sure.
Yes, yes.
In those cases, is it permissible, or what sort of caution should someone take when doing something like that?
Venting, if you're really oppressed, venting is permissible. Again, Sayyid Sistani says venting based on obligatory precaution only to those who can help you. But again, obligatory precaution doesn't mean you have to stick to it. If you go to the next most learned alim, they'll tell you, okay, you can vent even without seeking help. Now, venting sometimes in itself is helpful. You know, especially for someone who, if they keep it to themselves, they'll explode one day and cause them a lot of mental issues. So it's good that they vent. But my recommendation, my humble recommendation to the brothers and sisters, is when you vent to someone you really trust. Someone who is religious, someone who is wise, who will not go out and make this a bigger problem, right? Because sometimes we vent to someone, that someone tells to others, and we start a whole chain of talking about that person to the entire community. So when you vent to someone, make sure that someone either doesn't know that person, and that's the best approach. Because when you talk about someone without the other person knowing who it is, it's not ghibah. This is one of the elements of ghibah, we said, is to identify the person. So if I go to someone, let's say I go to my therapist, if I had one, and he doesn't know Brother Kamal and Brother Ibrahim, and I start to vent about you guys, what you've done to me today. And then, of course, you've done nothing but great to me today. But assuming, hypothetically, you've done something else, and I go and vent, right? He doesn't know who you guys are, so it's not going to be ghibah. So it's a good approach to do. Now, someone might say, but they know the entire people in the community. You don't have to mention who it is. One of the people in my community has done me wrong. Today he called me, he said 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, he hurt my feelings, I don't know. They don't know who it is, so I can vent, right? And it would not be ghibah. So that's the advice I want to give in that regard.
Thank you, and I think you've provided us with a lot of tools to help navigate this. I know most of the questions dealt with that topic that was only a couple days.
Yes, I think we definitely need more on ghibah. And I think it's real, honestly. The issue of ghibah is detrimental and is worthy of talking about. A lot of times we don't talk a lot about it, assuming that everyone knows it. But rulings, people tend to forget them between time and time, and reminders are needed. I definitely think we probably would need in the future, in-person seminars and more examples and more ahadith and more
Inshallah.
details so that people have a very good picture of how to apply these rulings in their lives.
Inshallah, and I look forward to that.
Inshallah.
If there's anything else that you'd like to add, Sayyid, otherwise, actually probably a good time to ask for forgiveness for everybody in the room here
Please.
and everybody in the community.
Please, I beg all of you and all those who are listening to us to forgive us for all our shortcomings, whether in the lecture, and I want to assure you, and I'm sure you give me the benefit of the doubt, that it's never intentional. We are human beings and things slip out right and left. We may not get to your questions sometimes, we may not answer them accordingly. Please forgive us for that. And also we ask all of our brothers in the community to have that mindset and that spirit of forgiving. This is the month of forgiveness. We ask Allah to forgive us, and Him forgiving us is contingent upon us forgiving each other. The best way to get Allah's forgiveness is to forgive each other. Let us all forgive each other and make this month of Ramadan a blank new white page for all of us to re-establish and revive our love to one another and our relationships, inshallah.
Inshallah. Alhamdulillah. Thank you, Sayyid.
Thank you. Jazakumullah. Thank you, everyone. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم رب شهر رمضان الذي أنزلت فيه القرآن وافترضت على عبادك فيه الصيام. صل على محمد وآل محمد وارزقني حج بيتك الحرام في عامي هذا وفي كل عام، واغفر لي تلك الذنوب العظام فإنه لا يغفرها غيرك يا رحمن يا علام. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم إني أفتتح الثناء بحمدك وأنت مسدد للصواب بمنك، وأيقنت أنك أنت أرحم الراحمين في موضع العفو والرحمة، وأشد المعاقبين في موضع النكال والنقمة، وأعظم المتجبرين في موضع الكبرياء والعظمة. اللهم أذنت لي في دعائك ومسألتك، فاسمع يا سميع مدحتي، وأجب يا رحيم دعوتي، وأقل يا غفور عثرتي. فكم يا إلهي من كربة قد فرجتها، وهموم قد كشفتها، وعثرة قد أقلتها، ورحمة قد نشرتها، وحلقة بلاء قد فككتها. الحمد لله الذي لم يتخذ صاحبة ولا ولدا، ولم يكن له شريك في الملك، ولم يكن له ولي من الذل، وكبره تكبيرا. الله أكبر. الحمد لله بجميع محامده كلها على جميع نعمه كلها. الحمد لله الذي لا مضاد له في ملكه ولا منازع له في أمره. الحمد لله الذي لا شريك له في خلقه ولا شبيه له في عظمته. الحمد لله الفاشي في الخلق أمره وحمده، الظاهر بالكرم مجده، الباسط بالجود يده، الذي لا تنقص خزائنه ولا تزيده كثرة العطاء إلا جودا وكرما. إنه هو العزيز الوهاب. اللهم إني أسألك قليلا من كثير، مع حاجة بي إليه عظيمة، وغناك عنه قديم، وهو عندي كثير، وهو عليك سهل يسير. اللهم إن عفوك عن ذنبي، وتجاوزك عن خطيئتي، وصفحك عن ظلمي، وسترك على قبيح عملي، وحلمك عن كثير جرمي عندما كان من خطئي وعمدي، أطمعني في أن أسألك ما لا أستوجبه منك، الذي رزقتني من رحمتك، وأريتني من قدرتك، وعرفتني من إجابتك، فصرت أدعوك آمنا وأسألك مستأنسا لا خائفا ولا وجلا، مدلا عليك فيما قصدت فيه إليك، فإن أبطأ عني عتبت بجهلي عليك، ولعل الذي أبطأ عني هو خير لي لعلمك بعاقبة الأمور، فلم أر مولا كريما أصبر على عبد لئيم منك علي. يا رب، إنك تدعوني فأولي عنك، وتتحبب إلي فأتبغض إليك، وتتودد إلي فلا أقبل منك، كأن لي التطول عليك، فلم يمنعك ذلك من الرحمة لي والإحسان إلي والتفضل علي بجودك وكرمك، فارحم عبدك الجاهل وجد عليه بفضل إحسانك، إنك جواد كريم. الحمد لله مالك الملك، مجري الفلك، مسخر الرياح، فالق الإصباح، ديان الدين، رب العالمين. الحمد لله على حلمه بعد علمه، والحمد لله على عفوه بعد قدرته، والحمد لله على طول أناته في غضبه، وهو قادر على ما يريد. الحمد لله خالق الخلق، باسط الرزق، فالق الإصباح، ذي الجلال والإكرام والفضل والإنعام، الذي بعد فلا يرى وقرب فشهد النجوى، تبارك وتعالى. الحمد لله الذي ليس له منازع يعادله، ولا شبيه يشاكله، ولا ظهير يعاضده، قهر بعزته الأعزاء، وتواضع لعظمته العظماء، فبلغ بقدرته ما يشاء. الحمد لله الذي يجيبني حين أناديه، ويستر علي كل عورة وأنا أعصيه، ويعظم النعمة علي فلا أجازيه، فكم من موهبة هنيئة قد أعطاني، وعظيمة مخوفة قد كفاني، وبهجة مونقة قد أراني، فأثني عليه حامدا وأذكره مسبحا. الحمد لله الذي لا يهتك حجابه، ولا يغلق بابه، ولا يرد سائله، ولا يخيب آمله. الحمد لله الذي يؤمن الخائفين وينجي الصالحين، ويرفع المستضعفين، ويضع المستكبرين، ويهلك ملوكا ويستخلف آخرين. والحمد لله قاصم الجبارين، مبير الظالمين، مدرك الهاربين، نكال الظالمين، صريخ المستصرخين، موضع حاجات الطالبين، معتمد المؤمنين. الحمد لله الذي من خشيته ترعد السماء وسكانها، وترجف الأرض وعمارها، وتموج البحار ومن يسبح في غمراتها. الحمد لله الذي هدانا لهذا، وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله. الحمد لله الذي يخلق ولم يخلق، ويرزق ولا يرزق، ويطعم ولا يطعم، ويميت الأحياء ويحيي الموتى، وهو حي لا يموت.
بيده الخير وهو على كل شيء قدير. اللهم صل على محمد عبدك ورسولك وأمينك وصفيك وحبيبك وخيرتك من خلقك وحافظ سرك ومبلغ رسالاتك، أفضل وأحسن وأجمل وأكمل وأزكى وأنمى وأطيب وأطهر وأسنى، وأكثر ما صليت وباركت وترحمت وتحننت وسلمت على أحد من عبادك وأنبيائك ورسلك وصفوتك وأهل الكرامة عليك من خلقك. اللهم وصل على علي أمير المؤمنين ووصي رسول رب العالمين، عبدك ووليك وأخي رسولك وحجتك على خلقك وآيتك الكبرى والنبأ العظيم. وصل على الصديقة الطاهرة فاطمة سيدة نساء العالمين، وصل على سبطي الرحمة وإمامي الهدى الحسن والحسين سيدي شباب أهل الجنة. وصل على أئمة المسلمين علي بن الحسين ومحمد بن علي وجعفر بن محمد وموسى بن جعفر وعلي بن موسى ومحمد بن علي وعلي بن محمد والحسن بن علي والخلف الهادي المهدي، حججك على عبادك وأمنائك في بلادك صلاة كثيرة دائمة. اللهم وصل على ولي أمرك القائم المؤمل والعدل المنتظر، وحفه بملائكتك المقربين، وأيده بروح القدس يا رب العالمين. اللهم اجعله الداعي إلى كتابك والقائم بدينك، استخلفه في الأرض كما استخلفت الذين من قبله، مكن له دينه الذي ارتضيته له، أبدله من بعد خوفه أمنا، يعبدك لا يشرك بك شيئا. اللهم أعزه واعزز به، وانصره وانتصر به، وانصره نصرا عزيزا، وافتح له فتحا يسيرا، واجعل له من لدنك سلطانا نصيرا. اللهم أظهر به دينك وسنة نبيك حتى لا يستخفي بشيء من الحق مخافة أحد من الخلق. اللهم إنا نرغب إليك في دولة كريمة تعز بها الإسلام وأهله، وتذل بها النفاق وأهله، وتجعلنا فيها من الدعاة إلى طاعتك والقادة إلى سبيلك، وترزقنا بها كرامة الدنيا والآخرة. اللهم ما عرفتنا من الحق فحملناه، وما قصرنا عنه فبلغناه. اللهم المم به شعثنا، واشعب به صدعنا، وارتق به فثقنا، وكثر به قلتنا، وأعزز به ذلتنا، وأغن به عائلنا، واقض به عن مغرمنا، واجبر به فقرنا، وسد به خلتنا، ويسر به عسرنا، وبيض به وجوهنا، وفك به أسرنا، وأنجح به طلبتنا، وأنجز به مواعيدنا، واستجب به دعوتنا، وأعطنا به سؤلنا، وبلغنا به من الدنيا والآخرة آمالنا، وأعطنا به فوق رغبتنا يا خير المسؤولين وأوسع المعطين. اشف به صدورنا، وأذهب به غيظ قلوبنا، واهدنا به لما اختلف فيه من الحق بإذنك، إنك تهدي من تشاء إلى صراط مستقيم، وانصرنا به على عدوك وعدونا إله الحق آمين. اللهم إنا نشكو إليك فقد نبينا صلواتك عليه وآله، وغيبة ولينا، وكثرة عدونا، وقلة عددنا، وشدة الفتن بنا، وتظاهر الزمان علينا. وصل على محمد وآله، وأعنا على ذلك بفتح منك تعجله، وبضر تكشفه، ونصر تعزه، وسلطان حق تظهره، ورحمة منك تجللناها، وعافية منك تلبسناها، برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. السلام عليك يا رسول الله، السلام عليك يا أمير المؤمنين، السلام عليك يا فاطمة الزهراء، السلام عليك يا أبا محمد الحسن المجتبى، السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله الحسين الشهيد، السلام عليك يا علي السجاد، السلام عليك يا محمد الباقر، السلام عليك يا جعفر الصادق، السلام عليك يا موسى الكاظم، السلام عليك يا علي الرضا، السلام عليك يا محمد الجواد، السلام عليك يا علي الهادي، السلام عليك يا حسن العسكري، السلام عليك يا أبا القاسم المهدي، ورحمة الله وبركاته. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم كن لوليك الحجة ابن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا، وقائدا وناصرا، ودليلا وعينا، حتى تسكنه أرضك طوعا، وتمتعه فيها طويلا، برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين.